The city streets were drenched in heavy rain, the kind that made every puddle a mirror of distorted lights and every passerby scurry for cover. Sophie Randall, 26, clutched her small umbrella, though it did little to shield her from the relentless downpour. Her heels splashed through puddles as she hurried along the deserted street outside the airport terminal. Noah, her 6-month-old baby, cradled tightly against her chest in a soft carrier. Every step was a mixture of anxiety and determination. She had to get home safely, but the storm outside mirrored the storm in her heart. She had called Alex earlier, the father of her child, pleading with him to pick her up after a flight delay. But when he arrived, his indifference was palpable. He barely glanced at Noah and turned to her with an expression that mixed irritation and impatience. "I don't have time for this," he said coldly, brushing past her. "You handle him. I'm done with this." Sophie froze, gripping Noah tighter. The betrayal stung more than the icy rain soaking through her coat. She had hoped, even for a moment, that he would step up, that he would show any semblance of responsibility, but instead, he left her standing there, exposed and alone, a baby in her arms and no shelter nearby. Thunder rumbled overhead as Sophie scanned the darkened street, the faint glow of distant streetlights reflecting off wet asphalt. Her heart pounded, both from anger and fear. She crouched slightly over Noah, whispering, "It's okay. Baby will be okay." Suddenly, a sleek black car pulled up beside her, its headlights cutting through the heavy rain. The engine was quiet, almost imperceptible over the downpour, yet the presence it projected was commanding. Sophie looked up, unsure whether to hope or flee. Her trust in strangers had been shaken. The passenger side door opened smoothly, and a tall figure stepped out. Ethan Gray, 33, self-made millionaire and CEO, radiated confidence and authority. He was impeccably dressed, his coat tailored perfectly, yet there was a softness in his eyes that contrasted with the crisp lines of his appearance. "Miss," he called out over the rain, his voice calm but carrying a gentle authority. "You shouldn't be standing out here like this. It's dangerous for both you and the baby." Sophie blinked, startled. I'm fine," she said, her voice small but steady. "We'll manage." Ethan's eyes swept over her and the baby, noting the soaked coat, the trembling hands, and the worried gaze. "No," he said firmly, yet kindly. "You're not fine. You need shelter, warmth, and safety. Get in the car. I insist." For a moment, Sophie hesitated. Trust didn't come easily, especially after being abandoned in such a vulnerable moment. Yet something in Ethan's tone, the calm decisiveness and evident concern, made her pause. Noah stirred in her arms, his small cries tugging at her heart. She knew she couldn't leave him exposed to the rain any longer. She slowly nodded. "Okay," she whispered, her voice laced with caution and relief. Ethan opened the door fully and crouched slightly, gesturing gently. "Here, I'll help you with him." He took Noah into his arms carefully, adjusting the blanket and securing the baby against his chest. Noah calmed instantly, lulled by the stranger's confidence and warmth. Sophie stepped into the vehicle, her wet coat clinging to her, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing. She watched Ethan drive off, glancing at her periodically, ensuring she and Noah were comfortable. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely above the rain's rhythm. Ethan shook his head slightly, his eyes meeting hers with a faint smile. "No thanks needed," he said softly. "Right now, it's about safety. That's all that matters." The car moved through the rain-soaked streets, the city lights reflecting in shimmering puddles outside. Inside, the warmth contrasted sharply with the chill outside, and Sophie felt an unfamiliar sense of relief. For the first time since Alex had abandoned them, She felt that someone was looking out for her and Noah, not out of obligation, but out of genuine concern. As they drove, Ethan's presence was calm but attentive. He asked soft, gentle questions about Noah, his routines, and how long Sophie had been managing alone. She responded hesitantly at first, then gradually shared details, realizing that his interest was not intrusive but supportive. For Sophie, it was a strange mixture of emotions, relief, caution, and a faint spark of trust. She didn't yet know who this man truly was beyond his calm demeanor and the obvious wealth he carried, but she recognized instinctively that he could be relied upon, at least in this moment of crisis. The streets blurred past, the rain pattering on the windshield like a rhythmic reassurance. Noah yawned in Ethan's arms, and Sophie allowed herself to exhale, her heart still wary but lighter. The chance encounter at the airport, born from betrayal and danger, had now transformed into the beginning of an unexpected connection, a bond forged from courage, compassion, and the silent promise of protection. After Ethan Gray had picked Sophie and Noah up from the rain-soaked airport street, the three of them drove through the dimly lit city streets in calm silence. Sophie still clutched the strap of Noah's carrier, her mind racing with a mixture of disbelief, relief, and cautious curiosity about this stranger who had intervened so decisively. She had never expected anyone to step in with such genuine concern, and the thought that her ex had abandoned them lingered as a sharp contrast to Ethan's calm and attentive presence. Ethan, driving with ease, occasionally glanced at Sophie in the rearview mirror. His eyes, steady yet warm, took in her worried expressions and the way she held Noah close. He spoke gently, careful not to overstep boundaries. "He's comfortable?" Sophie nodded. "Yes, thanks to you." Her voice was quiet, layered with both relief and the faint uncertainty of encountering someone so unexpectedly kind. Ethan smiled faintly, adjusting Noah in his arms to ensure he was secure and warm. "Good. I want you to know, it's not just about tonight. You've been managing all of this on your own, and that takes strength. Courage, too." Sophie looked down at Noah, feeling the soft weight of her baby and the gravity of Ethan's words. I don't know if I've done anything extraordinary," she murmured. "I've just been trying to survive, to keep him safe." "That's extraordinary," Ethan replied gently. "Most people would have faltered under this kind of pressure, yet you didn't. You acted instinctively, and that instinct saved him." The taxi pulled up near a quiet riverside cafe, a discreet location where they could get out of the rain and sit safely. Sophie hesitated for a moment before stepping out, Noah in her arms, and Ethan immediately moved to shield her from the drizzle, a subtle gesture of protection that didn't feel imposing but rather reassuring. Inside the cafe, the warmth enveloped them. Steam rose from cups of hot chocolate and coffee, mingling with the faint aroma of fresh pastries. Sophie found a corner table and sat down carefully, placing Noah in a nearby chair seat lined with a soft blanket. Ethan stood nearby, ensuring they were settled comfortably. "You've been through a lot," he said softly, lowering his voice so Noah wouldn't be startled. "Being abandoned like that, it's not fair. But you handled it with strength." Sophie's eyes met his, hesitant but curious. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Ethan's gaze softened. "Because I couldn't ignore it. You didn't deserve to be left out in the rain with him. And I respect how you've handled everything. That deserves recognition." A quiet tension settled between them, punctuated by Noah's soft babbling as he explored the edges of the seat. Sophie allowed herself to relax slightly, feeling a small but growing sense of trust. This stranger, this billionaire who had appeared from nowhere, was genuine, careful, and kind. He wasn't imposing himself, he was offering support, nothing more, nothing less. They spent the next hour talking quietly. Sophie told him small details about Noah, how he reacted to rain, his favorite songs, the way he laughed at simple things. Ethan listened intently, asking thoughtful, gentle questions that revealed both his intelligence and his respect for her experience as a mother. There was no judgment, only careful attention. Sophie noticed that Ethan's presence was calming. His confidence was steady but not overbearing, and he seemed genuinely interested in understanding her and her child. For the first time in weeks, Sophie felt the sharp edge of isolation dull, replaced by a subtle sense of security. Ethan also observed Sophie closely, noting her composure under stress, the intelligence and instinct she displayed in caring for Noah, and the quiet resilience that radiated from her. It was more than courage, it was empathy, patience, and resourcefulness. He found himself respecting her deeply, admiration blossoming into a more personal, unspoken connection. By the time they left the cafe, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Ethan ensured Noah was secure and warm, and Sophie stepped into the car, feeling a rare sense of safety and hope. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. "You don't need to thank me," Ethan replied, his tone calm yet reassuring. "I'll always make sure you and Noah are safe. And if you allow it, I want to help, not to control, but to support." Sophie looked out the window, the city lights reflecting in puddles, her heart quietly acknowledging the strange shift in her circumstances. Trust, tentative but growing, had formed. The stranger who had appeared during her most vulnerable moment had not only saved her child, but had begun to change the trajectory of their lives. As they drove through the night, Sophie felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and cautious anticipation. She didn't yet know what the future held, but for the first time, she believed that help could arrive unexpectedly and that courage and compassion could forge connections stronger than fear and abandonment. The following morning, Sophie woke to the faint light of dawn filtering through her apartment window. Noah was still asleep in his bassinet, his small chest rising and falling with rhythmic innocence. Sophie allowed herself a quiet moment, reflecting on the previous night. The rain, the cold, the betrayal of her ex, everything had culminated in a single act of unexpected kindness from Ethan Gray, the millionaire stranger who had offered help without hesitation. She had spent hours replaying his calm authority, the gentleness in his voice, and the protective care he showed Noah. Her heart still raced when she thought about how he had appeared at exactly the right moment, bridging the gap between helplessness and safety. She had never expected such intervention, nor the immediate sense of security he had provided. As she prepared breakfast for Noah, her phone buzzed with a message. It was Ethan. "I'd like to meet you and Noah today. There's something important we need to discuss, your safety and future plans." Sophie hesitated. Trust did not come easily, especially with someone who was both a stranger and a figure of immense power. But she also knew that Noah's well-being was her priority, and Ethan's presence had already proven reliable. After a deep breath, she agreed. An hour later, Sophie and Noah arrived at a quiet riverside cafe, a discreet location Ethan had chosen. He was already there, waiting, dressed impeccably yet relaxed, holding a coffee cup for himself and observing them with calm attentiveness. His eyes softened as they approached, meeting hers with a mixture of respect and subtle warmth. "Good morning," Ethan said, rising slightly to greet them. "I hope you had some rest." Sophie nodded cautiously. "A little." Noah was restless, but he's fine. She placed him in a high chair, securing the blanket around him. Ethan pulled out a chair across from them, his movements careful not to overwhelm. "I wanted to make sure you both are safe and comfortable. Last night was intense. I want to understand everything so I can help properly." Sophie felt a mixture of relief and vulnerability. I didn't expect anyone to help," she murmured. Not like that. Ethan's gaze held a quiet intensity. Most people wouldn't. But when a child's safety is at stake, I can't ignore it. And you've been handling all of this alone. That takes courage, Sophie. More than you realize. Noah stirred, reaching toward Ethan instinctively. Sophie handed him over, watching carefully. Ethan cradled Noah with gentle assurance, his manner calm and respectful. "He's a remarkable little boy," Ethan said softly. "And you've done an incredible job keeping him safe, warm, and loved." Sophie's eyes softened, a faint blush rising. I've just been trying my best. That's all." "No," Ethan said firmly but kindly. "What you've done is extraordinary. Most people would have faltered, hesitated, or panicked. You acted with clarity, courage, and love. That deserves recognition." The conversation shifted to Noah's routines, his personality, and small anecdotes from the previous nights. Ethan listened intently, his questions thoughtful, his tone sincere. He didn't patronize her. He respected her knowledge, her instinct, and her decisions. For Sophie, this was a rare experience, someone acknowledging her competence while simultaneously offering support, without judgment or intrusion. The tranquility of the cafe provided a safe space for Sophie to relax. She noticed subtle gestures from Ethan, the way he adjusted Noah in her carrier, how he maintained space to avoid imposing, and how he ensured they were both comfortable. Slowly, a trust began to form, delicate but undeniable. Suddenly, the quiet was interrupted by the familiar sound of Alex's voice, calling from the street outside the cafe. He had apparently realized the presence of a stranger and had come to assert himself. "Sophie." "Noah," he shouted, trying to catch her attention. Ethan's expression remained calm but firm. He rose, subtly positioning himself between Sophie and Alex. "He's safe, and she's in control of the situation," Ethan said quietly but with unmistakable authority. "You will respect her boundaries." Alex's mouth opened, as if to argue, but Ethan's unwavering gaze and protective stance silenced him. Sophie felt a surge of relief. The man who had abandoned her yesterday was powerless in the presence of someone capable, kind, and decisive. Once Alex retreated, Sophie exhaled deeply, her shoulders loosening. She looked at Ethan, a mixture of gratitude, trust, and something more stirring in her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "No thanks needed," Ethan replied, sitting back down. "I'll make sure Noah is safe, and I'll help you whenever needed. You don't have to face this alone anymore." For the rest of the afternoon, they stayed in the cafe, the conversation growing lighter, more personal. They discussed future plans for Noah, practical concerns, and even small jokes that made them both laugh. The shared experience created a subtle bond, founded on trust, respect, and the recognition of courage under pressure. By the time Sophie left, carrying Noah carefully, she felt a fragile but growing sense of hope. For the first time since Alex's rejection, she sensed that someone could be relied upon, not out of obligation, but because of genuine care. Ethan's calm support had begun to transform her fear into trust, and the first seeds of a slow-burning connection had been planted. The following evening, Sophie and Noah were sitting on a quiet rooftop garden near the city center, the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off puddles left by the earlier rain. Ethan Gray had insisted on a safe, private place where they could talk without the chaos of the airport or prying eyes. Sophie watched Noah play with a small toy, his laughter mingling with the distant hum of the city, feeling a rare sense of calm. Ethan observed them quietly, noting the ease with which Sophie handled her child. Her instinctive care, patience, and attentiveness weren't just impressive, they were remarkable. Every movement, every glance, every subtle gesture told him she was more than just courageous. She was intelligent, resilient, and deeply compassionate. I can't believe he left me like that," Sophie murmured, her voice low, almost to herself. "It was like I didn't even exist." Ethan looked at her, his eyes softening. "Some people aren't capable of responsibility, Sophie. That doesn't define you. You've shown courage, resilience, and love, qualities that are rare and remarkable." Sophie felt her chest tighten. No one had acknowledged her struggle like this before. Not Alex, not anyone. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan knelt slightly to be closer to her eye level, keeping his tone gentle. "You don't need to thank me. I'm here to make sure Noah is safe and that you're supported. That's all that matters." They sat in a comfortable silence for a few moments, listening to the soft drizzle that had begun again. Noah crawled toward Ethan, reaching for his hand. Sophie watched, feeling a quiet relief and an unfamiliar warmth. The way Ethan interacted with her child, careful yet playful, protective yet gentle, made her realize she could trust him. "Would you let me help more?" Ethan asked quietly. "Not to take over, not to control, just to be someone you can rely on?" Sophie's eyes met his, weighing the sincerity in his gaze. She had been let down before, abandoned by the one person who should have cared. Yet this man, an absolute stranger until recently, offered nothing but support and respect. She nodded slowly. I think I'd like that," she admitted. The subtle trust between them solidified as Noah played happily in Ethan's lap. Sophie noticed how natural he was with him, the patience and attentiveness, and a sense of security washed over her. This wasn't just a temporary act of kindness. It was consistent, reliable, and unintrusive. Ethan glanced at Sophie, a faint smile breaking through his composed exterior. "You're stronger than you know," he said softly. "And I admire that about you, more than you can imagine." Sophie's cheeks warmed, but her smile was genuine this time. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax, to hope, and to feel that perhaps life could be different, not only safer for Noah, but richer and more meaningful for both of them. As the night grew darker, they walked along the garden path, side by side, Noah nestled safely between them. The gentle ambient light reflected off the wet leaves, creating a cinematic atmosphere filled with calm, warmth, and quiet intimacy. No words were needed to convey what had shifted between them. Mutual respect, trust, and admiration had blossomed naturally from crisis into connection. Sophie realized she was no longer alone, and Ethan understood the profound weight of responsibility and care she had carried all these months. By the end of the evening, Sophie and Noah were safely home, and Ethan left quietly, a subtle promise lingering in the air. He would always be there. The slow-burn romance had begun, delicate and respectful, born from courage, compassion, and shared experience. The storm outside had passed, leaving a city glistening with reflections and possibilities. Inside, a new chapter had quietly begun, a chapter of trust, support, and a connection that neither Sophie nor Ethan had expected, but both needed more than they realized. The next morning, the city streets glistened under the sunlight, reflecting the recent rain like scattered jewels. Sophie Harper stepped outside her apartment with Noah in her arms, the baby yawning sleepily and looking up at her with wide, trusting eyes. For the first time in days, she felt a sense of calm, her night of fear, cold, and betrayal now behind her. Ethan Gray arrived punctually in his sleek black car, stopping gently at the curb. He stepped out and opened the door with the same courteous ease he had shown from the very first moment. "Ready?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying a warmth that made Sophie's chest tighten slightly. Sophie nodded, settling Noah safely in his car seat. Ethan crouched slightly to adjust the blanket around the baby, his hands careful, precise, and protective. He's comfortable, he said softly, looking at Sophie with genuine concern. I don't know how to thank you, Sophie murmured, still wary but feeling the quiet trust that had been forming over the last few days. You don't need to, Ethan replied gently. I did what anyone responsible would do. But I want to be clear, this isn't about me taking over. It's about supporting you. You've done an incredible job already. Sophie felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. She had carried the weight of caring for Noah alone, navigating life without support and being abandoned by her ex. Yet now, with Ethan's steady presence, she felt the first glimmer of true safety and partnership. Their drive was quiet at first, punctuated by small laughter from Noah as Ethan gently bounced him in his lap. Sophie watched, fascinated at the effortless way he connected with her child, recognizing the warmth and sincerity that went beyond wealth or status. You really have a way with him, she said softly, a hint of wonder in her voice. I didn't expect someone like you to care so naturally. Ethan smiled faintly. I care because it matters. He matters. And so do you. His tone was calm, but there was a subtle intensity, a depth that Sophie felt resonate in her chest. As they reached a small park near the riverside, Ethan suggested a brief stop so Noah could stretch and play. Sophie agreed, and together they watched the baby crawl on the soft grass, laughing and clapping. In that simple, unguarded moment, Sophie felt a quiet connection form, not only between herself and Ethan but also between Ethan and Noah. Suddenly, a car drove past, and Sophie's ex appeared in the distance, gesturing ineffectively and calling out. Ethan stepped subtly in front of her, protective yet calm. Ignore him, he said quietly. He has no power here, and his opinion doesn't matter. Sophie nodded, comforted by his presence. For the first time, she felt her own strength reinforced by trust in someone else. She realized that responsibility didn't have to be carried alone. Ethan handed Noah back to her gently, making sure she was comfortable and secure. You've handled everything with incredible strength, he said. And now, maybe it's time to let someone help you. Slowly, carefully. Sophie met his eyes, the morning light catching the depth and sincerity in them. I think I'd like that, she whispered, a tentative smile breaking through. Ethan's faint smile widened just slightly, subtle but genuine. Good. Because I want to be here, not as a stranger, not as someone imposing, but as someone you can rely on. And maybe in time, more than that. Noah babbled happily, reaching for Ethan, and Sophie laughed softly, feeling the rare warmth of relief and hope. For the first time, she believed that life could be different. Not just safe, but enriched by trust, care, and connection. The story closed with cinematic imagery, Sophie holding Noah, Ethan standing close by. A quiet bond formed through courage, protection, and shared experience. The rain had passed, leaving the city sparkling in sunlight, and with it, the beginning of a subtle, slow-burning romance, trust solidified, and a new chapter of life for Sophie and Noah, safe, cherished, and full of possibility.